Ferry's close medium has been buffed as an anti-air. Previously, it had the same clash level as other jump-in aerial normals, meaning that if you try to use it against a jump-in attack, sometimes you would get a clash. Obviously, this wasn't ideal. The clash level is now the same as a 2 heavy, so this should mean that it's going to be able to beat in a lot of jump-ins now. Obviously, Ferry appreciates this. Ferry's far light has a couple of very important buffs to it. In the previous version of the game, it was an 8-frame startup attack with decent range. However, you'll note that on hit with its recovery, Ferry was actually -1 without a cancel, which is pretty bad, I would say. On block, the situation for Ferry was that she was -5 instead. These properties meant that Ferry really couldn't use this move repeatedly in neutral reliably, as the opponent could simply throw out a far-range attack in between far lights in order to disrupt pressure. This normal has received a couple of important buffs to turn it from a pretty bad normal, I would say, into a decent one, actually. For starters, it's now a 7-frame normal overall, so it's 1 frame faster. Additionally, the recovery was reduced by 3 frames, so you can see here on block, Ferry is actually -2. And then on hit, she's actually +2, which is great. While the change to the recovery means that she can't really threaten multiple of these in a row against an opponent, as the same answer I showed with Gran in the old patch also works here, Ferry can still reposition herself, and more reliably whiff punish things as well with this normal, which again is a thing that she appreciates. Far medium also has a slew of buffs to it. For starters, the startup on it has been reduced. Previously, this was a 10-frame startup attack. The startup has been reduced by 1, so now it's a 9-frame startup. This can be the difference between Ferry landing a hit or completely having it miss or getting stuffed out entirely, so a small change like this can have a lot of implications when it comes to a matchup. The recovery was also reduced as well. Previously, this was a -10 on block normal, which was pretty bad. And now, the move is -8 on block, which is still negative and unsafe, but it's often going to be more safe because it's going to be used in these spaced out situations. This can be the difference between Ferry being able to reposition herself or getting caught by the opponent. Again, another nice change. 2 other really good changes to this normal are going to be to its clash level as well as the forward hurt box. In the first 2 active frames, that forward hurt box has been reduced. She can still get poked out of this pretty preemptively, but it should reduce the number of cases where that happens. The increase in clash level is nice too, because against some other medium normals, previously, this normal would lose out against them. Meaning that enemies could pretty much preempt this poke by sticking out a fast recovery medium. But now when the stars align, instead of Ferry's normal losing in these situations, she should be able to get a clash. It will take a couple of tries here, but as you can see, now Ferry should be able to clash against these mediums. Far Heavy sees some similar changes to it as well. Previously, this was a 14-frame startup normal that had medium clash priority. This obviously wasn't the best look for her. Now, the startup has been reduced by 2 frames, so this hits on frame 12, and it has a heavy clash priority, so this will crush medium normals now. Honestly, really good change. Crouching medium has some other buffs too. Previously, this was a 12-frame startup attack that was -11 on block. Now, her 2M is faster by 1 frame, and is safer by 2 frames, so instead of being -11, it's -9. Not the craziest buffs in the world, but these little bits and pieces here should mean that Ferry has a little more freedom and safety when she's trying to poke out with these normals, especially against evasive opponents. Of course, all these buffs to startup that we are seeing across her kit should mean that Ferry has an easier time linking into her normals when it comes to her combo routing, or potentially opens up even new combos. Ferry's unique attack, Einball, has a very important buff to it. This move, in theory, was a useful thing for Ferry to do in order to do some chip damage to the opponent and force a turn back. In reality, however, though, there wasn't enough block stun to prevent the opponent from trying to guard cancel in between these attacks. So, if the opponent wanted to spend a point, They could pretty much instantly Brave counter this and get a counter hit knockdown, meaning that they had pretty much a full turn of Okizeme to their name. By increasing the block stun by a single frame, now Ferry is no longer able to be Brave countered in the start of her Einball. Instead, the opponent has to wait until the 9th hit in order to do so. And from there, Ferry is not in a counter hit state. Instead, she gets knocked back by a punish counter. So this is what happens when the opponent doesn't Brave counter, or rather the dummy is sent to Brave counter at the first instance. But if we set this up to number 10, this is what happens. This is a huge buff for Ferry. She's actually able to use this to try and force some chip damage or make the opponent decide between holding this pressure or Brave counting her off of it. A very important buff to her, I think. Ferry's last change is to Ultimate Tromb, which has one less frame of hit stop to it, making it easier to follow up from far range. This should just mean that it's a nice quality of life feature for Ferry players to get better confirms. After being nerfed from one of the most meme-tacular instances of the Season 1.5 patch, it's good to see side games at Arc System Works give Ferry some buffs in some pretty deserved ways, I would say. Making her normals a little more effective by making them safer on block and on whiff, or making them faster overall so that they're more likely to actually bully out the opponent, I think helps her keep to that zoning playstyle that she was designed to have, while not making it so that she has access to like some air unblockable stuff just due to the projectiles and other set play things she has going for her. I think the strongest part of her kit before was the set play element, and now it feels like the zoning might be catching up to it overall. Plus, making Einball actually useful as an offensive pressure tool, I think, is a great change for the character to have. I'm excited to see what Ferry players can do in this patch, considering that some of them have been able to make waves in the previous patch, like Iago Gorates.